After a judge sentenced another judge to jail time, chaos erupted in an Ohio courtroom. And taking the defendant into custody wasn't so easy, as a court officer had to drag her out. Cincinnati Judge Tracy Hunter was sentenced to 6 months in jail back in 2014, but she's been appealing the ruling ever since. She was convicted of misusing her position as a judge to help her brother, who was facing an employment dispute over his job in the county. Her lawyer has
All right, hold on. Stop what you're doing right now, because I need to tell you about something that just happened that is absolutely unhinged. Like, we've seen Trump do some wild things in courtrooms before, right? But this is next level. This is insane. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. October 10th, 2025, a federal courtroom. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, threatens a judge. Yeah, you heard me right. Threatens a judge. And then chaos, absolute chaos. Bailiffs rush in. The courtroom erupts. And Trump gets detained, briefly removed to a holding area because he wouldn't stop his verbal tirade against the judge who just ruled against him. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking this is just more media spin, right? Just another exaggerated headline trying to make Trump look bad. But no, this actually happened. Eyewitnesses were there. Media sources captured it. And the footage, the reports, they're everywhere. This is real. This is happening. And it's one of the most shocking moments of Trump's entire presidency. So here's the setup. Trump was in court dealing with yet another legal battle. This one tied to James Comey. Yeah, that James Comey, the former FBI director. And the judge hands down a ruling Trump does not like. Not one bit. And instead of just sitting there and taking it like every other president in history would do, Trump loses it. Completely loses it. He starts making what witnesses described as off-script remarks. Threatening language. The kind of stuff that leaves everyone in the room stunned. The judge warns him multiple times. Tells him to stop, or he'll be held in contempt of court. But does Trump stop? No, of course not. He keeps going, keeps pushing. And finally, the bailiffs have to step in. They have to physically intervene to restore order. They detain him, take him to a holding area, just to get him out of the courtroom, so the proceedings can continue. Can you believe this? The President of the United States getting detained in a federal courtroom because he threatened a judge. And here's the thing that makes this even more wild. This isn't the first time Trump's had these kinds of confrontations in courtrooms. Remember Judge Lewis Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll trial. He literally threatened to remove Trump from the courtroom because Trump kept making loud, disparaging comments. Or what about all the other times judges have had to warn Trump about his behavior? This is a pattern. This keeps happening, and it keeps escalating. Legal analysts are calling this outburst one of Trump's most dangerous yet, and they're not exaggerating. When you verbally threaten a federal judge, that's serious. That can lead to contempt charges, obstruction charges. These are federal statutes we're talking about. This isn't just bad optics. This is potentially criminal behavior, and it's coming from the President of the United States. But wait, it gets worse. You know what else is happening? Judges tied to Trump's trials have been facing hundreds of serious and credible threats. Hundreds. Security sources have confirmed this, and a lot of these threats came after Trump violated gag orders, after he publicly attacked judges and court officials. So now we've got a situation where Trump's rhetoric is putting federal judges in danger, and when those same judges rule against him, he threatens them in open court. This is insane. This is not normal. Now, depending on where you stand politically, you're probably having one of two reactions right now. Either you're thinking, yeah, this is exactly what we warned everyone about. Trump doesn't respect the rule of law. He thinks he's above the system. He's dangerous. Or you're thinking, no, this is just the corrupt courts going after Trump again. They're weaponizing the justice system. He's fighting back. He has to fight back. And that right there, that divide, that's the real story. because half the country looks at this and sees a president defending himself against a rigged system. The other half sees a president who's become a threat to democracy itself. There's no middle ground anymore, no shared reality. We can't even agree on whether it's okay for a president to threaten a federal judge. Think about that for a second. We're at a point where the president of the United States can threaten a judge, get detained by bailiffs, and half the country thinks it's justified. That's where we are. That's what American politics has become. And honestly, that might be scarier than the incident itself. So over the next 20-something minutes, we're going to break down exactly what happened in that courtroom. We're going to look at the pattern of Trump's confrontational behavior with judges. We're going to talk about what this means for the rule of law, for presidential power, for the relationship between the executive branch and the judiciary. And most importantly, we're going to figure out why this matters so much right now, with everything else going on politically, because this isn't just about one bad day in court. This is about whether we still have a functioning system of checks and balances, whether presidents are still bound by the same rules as everyone else, whether the courts can still do their job without being intimidated or threatened by the most powerful person in the country. These are fundamental questions about how democracy works, and what happened in that courtroom on October 10th forces us to confront them, whether we want to or not. So buckle up. This is going to get intense. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's actually walk through what happened here, because the headlines are crazy enough, but when you dig into the details, when you understand the full context, it gets even more wild. So Trump's in federal court. This case is tied to James Comey, the former FBI director who Trump fired back in his first term, the guy who wrote that book, the guy who testified to Congress, that James Comey. Now, the specifics of the legal case are complex, but what matters is this: the judge hands down a ruling, and it's not in Trump's favor. It's another legal setback in a long line of legal setbacks Trump's been dealing with throughout his second term. And Trump, he's sitting there in the courtroom, and according to multiple eyewitness accounts, he was already visibly enraged before the judge even finished reading the ruling. Like, you could see it building, the anger, the frustration. And then when the judge actually delivers the decision, Trump just snaps. He starts making what people described as off-script remarks, meaning he's not following whatever his lawyers told him to do. He's just going off, saying whatever comes to his mind. And some of what he said crossed the line. A big line. He threatened the judge. Now, we don't have the exact words yet. The court transcripts are still being finalized, but multiple sources confirm that Trump's language was threatening enough that the judge immediately warned him about contempt of court. That's a big deal. Contempt of court is not something judges throw around lightly. It means you're disrupting the proceedings, you're showing disrespect to the court, and if you don't stop, there are serious consequences. Fines, jail time, yeah, even for a president. But here's where it gets really crazy. The judge warns Trump, tells him to stop, to control himself. And Trump doesn't stop. He keeps going, keeps making comments, keeps escalating. And at some point, the bailiffs realize this situation is spiraling out of control. So they step in, they move toward Trump. And there's this moment, this chaotic moment, where the entire courtroom erupts. Secret Service is there because Trump's the president. Bailiffs are trying to maintain order. Lawyers are probably freaking out. And Trump is still going off about how the courts are corrupt, how this is all rigged. All his usual talking points, but now he's saying it directly to a federal judge who just ruled against him. Eventually, the bailiffs detain Trump. It's brief, it's procedural, but they physically remove him from the courtroom and take him to a holding area just to separate him from the situation, to let things cool down. And then after some time passes, after Trump presumably calms down or his lawyers talk some sense into him, the proceedings resume. But the damage is done. The footage is out there. The reports are everywhere. Everyone knows what happened, and here's what makes this so significant. This is part of a pattern. This isn't a one-time thing. Trump has a history of confrontational behavior in courtrooms. Let's go through some examples real quick, because this context matters. Remember the E. Jean Carroll trial? Judge Lewis Kaplan literally threatened to remove Trump from the courtroom. Why? Because Trump kept making loud comments, disparaging remarks. While Carroll was testifying, the judge had to warn him multiple times, had to tell him that if he didn't control himself, he'd be kicked out, and Trump barely managed to keep it together enough to stay in the room. Or what about all the times Trump has violated gag orders, orders that judges put in place specifically to prevent Trump from attacking court officials, witnesses, prosecutors? Trump violated those orders repeatedly, posted about judges on social media, made public statements attacking them, and every time the judges had to decide whether to hold him in contempt, whether to actually enforce the rules, or let the president of the United States get away with behavior that would land anyone else in jail. And here's something really disturbing. Security sources have confirmed that judges tied to Trump's cases have faced hundreds of serious and credible threats. Hundreds. We're talking death threats, threats against their families. And a lot of these threats came after Trump publicly attacked these judges, after he called them corrupt, after he told his millions of followers that these judges were part of a conspiracy against him. So Trump's rhetoric isn't just disrespectful, it's dangerous. It's putting people's lives at risk. Now Trump and his supporters would say, no, you've got it backwards. The courts are weaponized against him. The judges are biased. They're all appointed by Democrats or influenced by the deep state or whatever. Trump's just defending himself. He's fighting back against a system that's trying to destroy him. And look, I get that argument. I understand why people believe it. If you think the entire justice system is rigged against one person, then yeah, you probably support that person fighting back however they can. But here's the problem with that logic. If we accept that it's okay for a president to threaten judges because he thinks they're biased, then we've basically destroyed the judicial system. Because every president could make that claim. Every politician could say the judges are against them. And then what? Do we just let people threaten judges whenever they lose a case? Do we let the president of the United States intimidate the judiciary into ruling his way? That's not how democracy works. That's how authoritarianism works. And this is happening right now. In October 2025, while we're dealing with potential government shutdowns, while Congress is deadlocked on major policy issues, while there are huge questions about presidential power and executive authority, this courtroom chaos is happening in the middle of all that and is dominating the news cycle. It's shaping how people see Trump's second term. It's influencing how voters think about the 2026 midterms that are coming up. For Trump's base, this probably looks great. Their guy's fighting. He's not backing down. He's standing up to corrupt judges who are trying to take him down. That narrative works. It energizes people. It makes them want to support Trump even more because they see him as a victim of a rigged system. But for everyone else, for moderates, for independents, for people who aren't fully on board with Trump, this is terrifying. This looks like a president who's out of control, who doesn't respect the law, who thinks he can threaten judges and get away with it. And that's not appealing. That's repulsive. That drives people away. So politically, this incident cuts both ways. Trump's base gets more loyal. His opponents get more energized. In the middle, the people who could go either way, they're watching this and trying to figure out what it means. Is Trump a fighter or is he dangerous? Is he defending himself or is he attacking democracy? Those are the questions voters are asking right now, and legal analysts are watching this with serious concern because verbal threats to a federal judge, that's not just bad behavior, that's potentially criminal. Under federal law, threatening a judge can lead to obstruction of justice charges. It can lead to contempt charges that carry real penalties. And while it's unclear if anything will actually happen to Trump because, let's be honest, holding a sitting president accountable is really hard, the fact that we're even talking about it is significant. There's also the question of what this does to the judiciary as an institution. Judges are supposed to be independent. They're supposed to make decisions based on the law, not based on who's going to threaten them or attack them on social media. But when the president of the United States is threatening judges in open court, when he's putting their safety at risk with his public statements, how does that affect their ability to do their job? Are judges going to be more hesitant to rule against Trump because they're afraid of the backlash? Or are they going to be more determined to show they won't be intimidated? Either way, Trump's behavior is affecting how the judicial system functions, and that's a problem. We're also seeing this play out against the backdrop of Trump's broader fights with the courts. He's had multiple rulings go against him on immigration policy, on executive orders, on emergency declarations, and every time he loses in court, Trump frames it as evidence that the system is rigged, that the courts are political, that judges are his enemies. That narrative has been consistent throughout his entire political career, but now he's actually threatening judges. He's escalating beyond just rhetoric, and that changes things. So that's the context. That's what led to this moment. A president who's been fighting with the courts for years, who's convinced his supporters that judges are corrupt, who's violated gag orders and attacked court officials repeatedly. And now he's crossed another line. He's threatened a judge in open court and had to be detained by bailiffs. And we're all trying to figure out what it means and where it goes from here. All right, let's break this down into clear points because there's a lot happening and we need to understand what it all means. Point number one, this is about the rule of law. Can the president of the United States threaten a federal judge and face no consequences? That's the core question here. In any normal situation, if you threaten a judge in a courtroom, you'd be held in contempt immediately. You'd probably be arrested. You'd definitely face serious legal consequences. But Trump is the president. So does that change things? Does being president put you above the rules that apply to everyone else? Because if the answer is yes, If Trump can threaten judges without facing real consequences, then we fundamentally changed how our system works. We've created a two-tiered justice system where the president is untouchable. And here's why that's so dangerous. The judicial system only works if everyone respects it. If people believe that judges can make fair decisions without being intimidated or threatened. If we lose that, if we accept that powerful people can threaten judges to influence their rulings, then the whole system falls apart. Cases become about who can intimidate better, about who has more power, not about what's legal or right. That's not justice, that's corruption. But Trump's defense, and this is what his supporters would say, is that the courts have already been weaponized against him, that judges are making political decisions, not legal ones, that he's just fighting back against a system that's trying to destroy him. And look, I get why that resonates with people. If you believe the system is rigged, then fighting back seems justified. But even if you believe that, even if you think the courts are biased, threatening judges can't be the answer. Because once you normalize that behavior, once you say it's okay for presidents to threaten judges, then every president will do it. And then we don't have a justice system anymore. We just have chaos. Point number 2, the pattern of behavior. This isn't an isolated incident. Trump has a documented history of confrontational behavior with judges. The E. Jean Carroll trial, where Judge Kaplan threatened to remove him, the multiple gag order violations, the public attacks on judges and their families, the social media posts calling judges corrupt and biased. This has been happening over and over, and it keeps escalating. It started with tweets, then it became courtroom outbursts. Now it's actual threats in open court. Where does it end? What's the next escalation? These are real questions we need to be asking. And here's something that should worry everyone. The threats against judges have increased dramatically. Hundreds of serious, credible threats against judges hearing Trump-related cases. That's not normal. That's not okay. And it's happening because Trump keeps attacking these judges publicly. He tells his millions of followers that these judges are corrupt, that they're part of a conspiracy. And some percentage of those followers take that message and turn it into threats, into violence. We've already seen it happen. So when Trump threatens a judge in court, he's not just affecting that one moment. He's contributing to a broader culture of intimidation and violence against the judiciary. Point number 3, the political implications. This happened in October 2025. We've got midterm elections coming in 2026, and this incident is going to shape that election cycle. For Trump supporters, this energizes them. They see their guy fighting the corrupt system, standing up to biased judges, refusing to be silenced. That narrative is powerful. It drives turnout. It makes people more loyal to Trump. But for everyone else, this is concerning. Moderates see a president who can't control himself. Independents see someone who doesn't respect democratic institutions. Swing voters see instability and chaos. And that's not attractive. That drives people toward whoever's running against Trump's allies in the midterms. So this could actually hurt Republicans in Congress. It could cost them seats because voters are worried about Trump's behavior. And think about the candidates running in 2026. Do they embrace Trump after this? Do they defend his behavior in that courtroom? Or do they distance themselves and risk losing his base? It's an impossible position. Whatever they choose, they alienate somebody. That's the reality of Trump's impact on the Republican Party. He's such a polarizing figure that candidates have to choose between his base and everyone else. There's no middle path anymore. Point number 4, what happens next legally? Trump's team will appeal whatever ruling triggered this outburst. That's guaranteed. They'll take it to higher courts, possibly all the way to the Supreme Court, and we'll see if those courts rule differently. But the bigger legal question is whether Trump faces any consequences for threatening the judge. Will he be held in contempt of court? Will there be obstruction charges? Realistically, probably not, because holding a sitting president accountable is incredibly difficult. The political will isn't there. The mechanisms aren't clear. So Trump will likely get away with this just like he's gotten away with so many other things. And that sets a precedent. Future presidents will see that Trump threatened a judge and faced no real consequences. So why wouldn't they do the same? If you're a president and you think a judge is ruling unfairly, why not threaten them? Why not try to intimidate them? If there are no consequences, then the behavior continues. It gets normalized. And that's dangerous for democracy. Point number 5, the bigger picture. This is about more than just one courtroom incident. This is about the relationship between the executive branch and the judiciary, about whether we still have checks and balances, about whether courts can still constrain presidential power, or if presidents can just intimidate judges into ruling their way. These are fundamental questions about how American democracy functions. Trump has been pushing these boundaries his entire political career, testing how far he can go, how many norms he can break, how many rules he can bend or ignore, and every time he does it without facing consequences, he pushes a little further. The threats in the courtroom are just the latest escalation, but they won't be the last, because Trump has learned that he can get away with almost anything as long as his base supports him, and his base does support him. They see him as a fighter, as someone who's willing to do whatever it takes. So where does this leave us? We've got a president who threatened a federal judge, who got detained by bailiffs, who's part of a pattern of escalating confrontational behavior with the judiciary. And we're all watching to see what happens next. Will there be consequences? Will the system hold? Or will this just become another thing we accept? Another norm we've lost? The answer to those questions will define not just Trump's presidency, but the future of American democracy. Because if presidents can threaten judges without consequences, then the judiciary can't function independently. And if the judiciary can't function independently, then we don't really have separation of powers anymore. We just have whatever the president wants. And that's not democracy. That's something else entirely. Here's what to watch in the coming weeks. First, does Trump face any legal consequences for this? Any contempt charges? Any sanctions? Second, how do voters react? Does this hurt Republicans in upcoming elections or energize Trump's base even more? Third, do other politicians start copying this behavior? If Trump gets away with it, will others think they can too? And most importantly, what does this mean for the rule of law? Can we still say that everyone is equal under the law when the president can threaten judges? Can we still claim that our institutions are strong when they can't hold the most powerful person accountable? These are the questions that matter. These are the questions that will determine what kind of country we are. Trump threatened a judge, got detained, and might face zero real consequences. That's where we are in October 2025. And honestly, it's wild that we're even having this conversation, but here we are. So pay attention, because what happens next matters. For all of us, for democracy itself. Stay tuned. More chaos is definitely coming.